Outside these walls, a research paper on the yellow wallpaper. My thesis is that isolation leads the narrator of the yellow wallpaper to believe she is alone, and she begins to develop an unbalanced mindset and lose rationality. She feels like it's her against the world with no support system. And unfortunately, that is the case. Early on in the story, The Yellow Wallpaper, Gilman reveals the different outlooks on superstition between John and his wife, the narrator. She states he has no patience with faith, an intense horror of superstition, and he scoffs openly at any talk of things not to be felt and seen and put down in figures. Because John is a physician, he acts like his judgment is better than his own wife's and invalidates anything she has to say. If a physician of high standing and one's own husband assures friends and relatives that there is really nothing the matter with one but temporary nervous depression, a slight hysterical tendency, what is one to do? One could argue that John is manipulative because he continues to influence other characters to side with him. Jenny, who is John's sister, briefly gives the time of day and tries to see the narrator's obsession with the wallpaper. Influenced by her brother's firm belief that his wife is going through a major depression that is impeding her from seeing and thinking clearly, Jenny ignores the narrator's assessment on the wallpaper. Not only does John influence other close friends and family to let his wife rest, he also restricts her excessively. Restriction in an unhealthy manner. With very minimal physical activity and restricted from talking about her feelings, she naturally starts to become irrational. It starts to sound much like being punished or kidnapped and being kept captive. Communication is an important factor in any healthy relationship, but John revokes this right from his wife. Gilman says in an article, specifically she wants to write, and the story she is narrating is her desperate and secret attempt both to engage in work that is meaningful to her and to retain her sanity. But even when simply writing, she hides it from her husband. When she was left with nothing to do, she acquired a strange obsession with the wallpaper in her bedroom. The environment helps the plot develop. Living in a limited environment with little interaction can in fact drive a person unstable. Bachelard argues that external space exists only through our perception of it. Outside of this room, which was her world, the narrator knew nothing more than what went on in her isolated life. I'm getting really fond of the room in spite of the wallpaper, she says. Perhaps because of the wallpaper. There was no external space, she was isolated, and the yellow wallpaper turned into existence because over time, that is as far as her perception reached. In an article, The Woman and Her Work, Gilman opens up about some truth and reasoning behind writing The Yellow Wallpaper. After going through postpartum depression, Gilman instead decided to defy rest recommendations from her doctor, and she did the exact opposite. Instead of living under the care and supervision of her husband, she divorced her husband without a clear reason and sent her baby away to live with him and his new wife, who was once a close friend to her. Gilman overcame what other women were enduring by getting out into the world and pursuing a career, rather than being isolated. Being her own person, she became successful and reached a level of happiness which gave her a reason to live. Personally, I believe that congenial work with excitement and change would do me good. Gilman says, she needed to feel productive and alive, therefore she went off to do her own thing. With emotional and loving support, she could have felt more secure about her thoughts, receiving feedback of what was rational and unreasonable thoughts. The isolation drove the story to its climax and the narrator to an intense ending. The truth is the narrator is more aware and considerate about the situation at hand. They disagree about her illness and she agrees to keep quiet about it. John says the very worst thing I can do is to think about my condition, and I confess it always makes me feel bad. So I will let it alone and talk about the house. Without restrictions, she could have discovered what made her happy and life meaningful. She would have had the chance to stimulate her mind and not become mentally unsteady. Finally, being in control of her environment with the option of breathing natural air or coming and going as she pleased would have satisfied her need to be free and expressive, thus avoiding her mental instability. With emotional loving support, she could have felt more secure about her thoughts, receiving feedback of what was rational and unreasonable thoughts.